Hi, Shalom, and welcome to the Israeli section of the Good Food Conference. My name is Goldstein. I am the managing director here at G5 Israel. Me and my team put together a fascinating 60-minute session for you, so why don't we jump right in? In today's session, we will explore Israel, one of the world's leading alternative protein hubs. What makes it number 2 in the world in the number of startups? How come a quarter of cultivated meat investment in 2021 was made here? And why does the Israeli Prime Minister wants to make us an alternative protein powerhouse? Well, in order to give you some answers, my team and I will discuss some of the business, academic, and policy aspects of our hub, and we will even hear from leading investors and government officials. At the end of the session, we will be able to do some networking, so stay tuned, and we even have a few surprises for you. Before we begin, I want to thank our marketing team, Yael Meloded-Snyder and Adas Karshai, for putting this wonderful event together. Thank you again. And also please note that since today is a Jewish holiday, and we had to pre-record some of the sessions. And now let's watch a couple of very brief videos we made here at G5 with the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Those videos were shared by over 50 Israeli embassies around the world. So enjoy, and let's begin.
You don't need to raise an animal and slaughter it to get the muscle that makes our meat. We can take cells from an animal and then grow them without the animal itself. The only way for me to make sure that they eat the same type of diet that I did, the same chicken schnitzel that my mother used to make, is to make sure we fundamentally change the way we make food around the globe. Culture meat starts with a simple process of taking cells from animals. We obtain the cells, we immortalize them, essentially allow them to start growing forever in a nutrient probe. From that bioreactor, you get the mass of muscle cells and fat cells that give you the experience of meat without slaughtering an animal, without causing the harm. We can produce meat that is as delicious and as healthy, even better, than traditional meat.
We really need to fundamentally change the way we manage our natural resources and we produce our food on Earth in order to make sure that we can continue and thrive as a species on Earth.
We are mimicking the natural process happening within the cow, but outside of the cow. We learned how the tissues regenerate themselves, especially the muscle tissue, which is actually the steak that we all like and eat.
One key benefit of cultivated meat is that being meat, it incorporates all the good nutritional profile of the meat we know today. We just change the production process.
And we have the flexibility to create whichever meat cut that we would like to have. This procedure is much safer, ethical, reproducible, and have a lot of advantages, and the taste is very good, the same as conventional meat. Israel is leading in the technology of cells, especially stem cells, for many years, coming from the therapy and, of course, leading with food.
Cultivated meat has the capability of providing secure and unconditional access to high-quality nutrition for anyone, anytime, anywhere.
Very soon, farmers and producers all around the world would understand that if they use our technology, they can produce the same meat for a fraction of the cost, much faster and much more efficiently than ever before.
We are from Israel, a tiny country with not a lot of land, not a lot of resources. How can we become a global leader? By innovating, by continue to develop new approaches, new technologies, new products, and very effectively bring them to all the people around the world.
The demand today comes from consumers who are looking for ethical products that are sustainable and healthier. We are bringing a better option to the world.
How we do it? We take the same elements that make meat, proteins, fat, molecules that give you flavor, and compile them into a delicious food product instead of in a cow, in a 3D printer. It can be healthy, it can be from plants.
Up until now, they didn't have the option to replace eggs because they were lacking the functionality or the taste and texture. So Zero Eggs bring to the table a solution, a variety of very tasty, nutritious, plant-based dishes without using eggs.
In Israel, we have two unique combinations. One, it's a risk-taking society. So when we started with our science fiction idea, people told us, it's crazy, go for it. And the second thing, the government is extremely supportive in doing what we're doing.
Us as Israeli people, we are people that like to share and to exchange ideas and to have brainstorms together. So this kind of community really helps us grow together as food tech companies.
And this allows Israel today to be a leader in the alternative protein space. It's more healthy, no cholesterol, no saturated fat, much more fiber.
So you get the good that you have in eggs without animal cruelty and without harming the environment.
What you save in eating a single steak of redefined meat is equivalent to all of the showers you take in a year. It's equivalent to driving across Israel in your car. You can deliver impact by eating really tasty meat. So it's a win-win for everybody.
In one bag, you have the equivalent of 259 eggs.
Once we understand as an industry how cultural and how emotional meat is, and how this relates to deliciousness, to how tasty it is, the rest is easy.
Pushing the food industry forward and really changing the way we are eating today.
When you eat food, when you feel it, when you put it in your body, the science fiction becomes reality.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. My name is Aviv, Oren, and I'm leading the business engagement and innovation at Diversify Israel. And today I would like to talk to you about Israel as a leading innovation hub for alternative protein. We will discuss investments in this market, the startup scene, and let me take you through a few minutes with interesting facts. Israel is ranked number 2nd in the world in the number of cultivated meat and milk companies. We had 5 companies in the beginning of the year and 2 new companies under this sector during 2021. Israel is also number 2nd in the world in the number of fermentation companies with 10 companies. The cultivated meat companies in Israel have raised 133 million so far in 2021, which is 25% of the world investments in this field. And MeatTech is the first company in the world in these sectors to be publicly traded on the NASDAQ. What makes Israel such a great innovation hub and entrepreneurships? A lot of that is coming due to the investments that we receive in this market. Israel is ranked number 1st in the world in VC investments per capita, and in the States, R&D spending per capita. Most of it is coming from the Israeli Innovation Authority. When we look at the startup scenes in the alternative protein companies, there are over 100 companies in Israel that are active in this sector. About 40% of them are in the model of startups with breakthrough technology, and about maybe 40 plus startups in the pipeline that we work with those entrepreneurs from the science background and the business background to establish a new companies. We have companies under the 3 sectors of cultivated, fermentation, and plant-based, as you can see in these tables, in the different stage of the growth of the companies. So far in 2021, the major and leading deal from the Israeli companies are Future Meat that have raised $26.7 million in round A in order to establish their manufacturing facility for cultivated fat. We have other farms that completed a Series B of $105 million. We have Redefined Meat, a plant-based companies with a unique 3D printed technology in order to create a whole cut steak that raised $29 million in Series A, and Equinome, a breeding company to improve the ingredients of the plant-based materials that raised $20 million in Series C. If we summarize the investments in 2020, the alternative protein startups in Israel have raised $114 million under the categories of cultivated meat, fermentation, and plant-based. So far, and up until July 2021, The alternative protein startups in Israel have raised $203 million so far. We are aiming, the forecast actually by the end of the year that it will be close to $500 million of capital raised by the alternative protein startups in Israel. The alternative protein is actually the fastest growing market in the tech industry in Israel. However, the investments are still small. If we compare the alternative protein investments, $114 million, for example, to the fintech in Israel, the fintech industry in Israel raised $1.7 billion. So there is still a lot of room to grow for those young companies and for more companies to join these sectors. If we take the average of the last 3 years in investments, so we see that the alternative protein industry grew on average on 187% in investments, far ahead of the leading tech industries in Israel, such as cybersecurity, fintech, and smart mobility. The call for action for those of you listening that are coming from the food corporates, from governments, Israel is looking for partnerships in infrastructures and R&D innovation center, for more innovation, international innovation program to come here and invest in the great entrepreneurship spirits that we have, and of course, later stage and big investments for those companies to grow. Thank you very much for joining us. After me, Dr. Michal Halpert will discuss the academic and the great science and research that we have here in Israel.
Thank you, Aviv. So my name is Michal Halpert, and I'm the Academic Relations Manager at GFI Israel. In this presentation, I would like to highlight some of the work and the status of the academia in Israel. So academia has a central role in the advancement of alternative protein space, which we can divide into 4 main segments. One is the performance of groundbreaking open access research, which is focused on addressing white spaces in the field. The second is the commercialization of this research in order to present new innovations to the world. 3 is educating the scientists of the future by establishing specific courses and training programs. And 4, universities have a role in building a community that brings together scientists and students from different disciplines and backgrounds in order to multiply the forces of advancing this field. Now I would like to highlight some of the work in Israel in regarding to those segments. We have just recently published an academic scientist database mapping active and potential researchers. We have 29 active researchers working in all 3 technologies and over 300 interested or relevant researchers. So as we see, the knowledge, the interest, and the potential are quite big. We invite you to take a look at this database and think of interesting new collaborations and connections you would like to have with Israeli scientists. Another interesting point that can also be seen in this database is the involvement of Israeli scientists in the industry, either as advisors or as founders. It is interesting to see that a lot of the alternative protein companies here in Israel have started in the academia, and you can see in this, the slide in front of you only some examples of that. The commercialization route in Israel is widely known and used by researchers that are focused on that direction from the beginning. This is what enables the relatively quick transition from academia to industry and might be one of the reasons that Israel became a leading innovation hub. Regarding education, so in order to generate a tool to educate the scientists of the future, we have established an alternative protein course that we have delivered already in 3 different leading universities here in Israel. And we are supporting others also internationally to open and to develop courses on the basis of our materials. We are interested to partner with additional universities all around the world to set up more academic courses on alternative proteins. I will note that our materials include speaker notes and are being recorded in English and can be available upon request. And when we're talking about communities, we must mention the work of GFI US team in building student groups and leading to the establishment of a global community of 16 universities, including one for the moment in Israel. It is located in Tel Aviv University and led by Michal and Gaia Savion. They are PhD students in the lab of Dr. Iftach Nachman, which is also a grantee of GFI. And they are doing great work in guiding other students that are interested in the field. This was a really quick academic overview. And before I finish, I would like to present two calls for actions. One, we would like your help in continuing building a strong international community. And if you're interested in research in the field, please let us know. We can include you in our databases, also in the international and the local ones, and we can provide you with guidance and help. And you are, of course, more than welcome to use our databases to find potential collaborations. Regarding the course, so together with world's top universities, we look forward to raising the next generation of alternative protein scientists. We can provide the course materials, as I mentioned, in addition to supporting you every step of the way. You just need to reach out and let us know about your interest. So thank you very much for listening, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. And now back to Nir, that will give you an overview of the policy in Israel.
Okay, welcome to the Israeli policy session. So I think it's a must to begin with the highlights of our policy engagement work here in Israel. On the left, you can see that in December 2020, we met with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and he actually became the first head of state globally to taste cultivated meat. That was a cultivated steak by Aleph Farms. And in that event, we were able to present the Prime Minister with J5's national policy plan. At the end of the event, at the statement, the Prime Minister said that Israel should become a global powerhouse for alternative protein technologies. So that was in December 2020. On the right, you can see that just about a month ago, Prime Minister Bennett presented to President Biden the Israeli leadership on alternative protein. And actually a day before he left to meet the president, he met with a team of Israeli experts in climate technologies, including myself, and we were able to discuss the Israeli ability to contribute to the global fight against global warming and the climate crisis using Israeli technologies. The Prime Minister was very excited to learn about the Israeli leadership in the field. So why are the two so excited and eager to do more with alternative protein? I think there are a variety of reasons, and here we tried to put them in a circle mode so that we are able to present them and show what the Israeli government is really getting from an investment and a leadership in alternative protein. The first internal cycle is the ability to produce food locally, to produce protein locally for local consumption. That would create, in Israel alone, a relatively small state, 30,000 jobs, according to our analysis. Those companies and jobs will pay taxes and increase the government income. And obviously, as you have learned in our conference by now, increase food security locally. We will also be able to export food. Israel currently only exports 5% of its local food manufacturing. The ability of alternative proteins to be shipped and manufactured and consumed overseas is not similar to what we are having in foods that are coming from the animal industry. So that allows the Israeli food industry for the first time to really ship more of its what it's manufacturing. The third circle is about shipping, but also smart ingredients. So let's say in cultivated meat, just the cell lines or the medium, and then to allow the final production and manufacturing closer to the consumption markets. That's something that is less doable in animal-derived proteins. We are also, of course, able to trade intellectual property. This is a very significant chunk of the Israeli government's income right now, as we are a startup nation. And also it allows for the creation of an international service sector. Israeli companies will be able to create a local industry to begin with, but then we will be able to assist other countries and to support the global transformation with services such as planning, construction, and consulting, the same way we do with other technologies such as water and agriculture, for example. All of those in a whole create a strategic asset, a diplomatic asset for the Israeli government, especially in an age of climate and health crisis. So what does the Israeli government need to do? Well, in the last 2 years, we have put, as I mentioned before, a national policy plan aimed at making Israel a global leader in alternative protein. We were looking for the specific gaps at which a government intervention is most impactful in our field, and we have found 3 after discussing it with dozens of experts from Israel and abroad, from the industry, government, and scientific regions. We found that first, the Israeli government, like other governments, must invest more in the scientific research, in creating labs, in financing research, and more. The second gap that needs government intervention is the ability of startups to transition from research to product development and scale up. Those facilities exist overseas, in Europe, in Asia, in the United States, and Israeli startups currently have to leave the country in order to scale up from pilot production to something a little bit with a little bit of a greater scale. That's something that the Israeli government will benefit from investing in. And the last gap also is common with other countries, is the necessity to obtain regulatory approval for all novel foods, especially cultivated meat. In all of those 3 factors and gaps, I believe that we have made some progress in discussions with the government. Of course, with the support of the Prime Minister, it's a lot of help. And I believe that by the end of 2022, we will be able to show a significant advancement. So what's next? A call for action. I think the Israeli government and policy sector as a whole have created a good benchmark in some areas that could be used by other countries, and you're welcome to read our report that I will show later on at the end of the session and learn more about what we have done here in Israel, and some of it could be translated to other countries. The second thing, second call of action is for international collaborations. We are a very small country that is looking to collaborate with other countries. We have knowledge with regards to innovation, scientific research, scale up, and industrial production. So please reach out and let's make alternative protein more of a reality. And now that I've shared the Israeli policy aspect of alternative proteins, let me take you to a fireside chat without a fire with Anya Eldan from the Israeli Innovation Authority. We will chat about what policy looks like in Israel from the decision-making side. So now I'm thrilled and honored to welcome Anya Eldan, VP of the Israeli Innovation Authority, or IIA. If you are not familiar with the organization, the IIA is defining the policy and developing support programs to foster innovation in various industry segments in Israel, from academic research and early stage innovation and entrepreneurship, all the way to advanced industrial manufacturing and more. Anya has over 30 years of executive experience in high-tech and life sciences companies, venture capital investments, and technology transfer ventures. In her role currently, Anya is managing ecosystem development activities in areas such as bioconvergence, climate tech, and you guessed it, alternative proteins as well. And above all, Anya is a close ally of G5 Israel. And thank you, Anya, for being here with us.
Thank you for inviting me. And isn't it great that food tech became high tech, finally?
A lot of it is thanks to you and the Innovation Authority. So it's a good lead to the first question. How does the Innovation Authority in Israel support the food tech field in general?
So in general, we like to be bottom-up oriented. So we like to be, as a government organization, we usually prefer that companies from different sectors approach us with proposals for support. And we try to be very independent and not very targeted. However, in some areas, and you mentioned some of them, like alternative proteins, we realize that a little more is needed. So sometimes there is a market failure, especially in new ecosystems, and then we take a more proactive approach. So in this case, we started supporting food tech and high tech in food tech through various technological incubators. So the first incubator by Strauss was established 6 years ago. And we now have 3 different platforms that create new companies in the areas of food tech. In the last few years, it became almost exclusively alternative proteins, and it became almost exclusively based on advanced academic research, which is very great, very good for Israel, because we really like supporting deep tech companies, because these are the companies that can take advantage of the real strength of the Israeli ecosystem. Strong engineering, multidisciplinary approach, academic research that gets transferred into the industry.
And I think you've done a wonderful job seeing how Israel has emerged as a food tech powerhouse. Even Prime Minister Netanyahu said so while he tasted cultivated meat. And I want to ask you, from your point of view, as the Innovation Authority and also the Israeli government, why are you interested in alternative protein to begin with?
So apart from being vegan, you mean me personally?
Apart from it.
Yes. Well, I think that, as I started saying, the strongest sectors in Israeli high tech are the ones that are based on deep academic research and are multidisciplinary. Alternative protein can be an extremely successful growth segment. We feel that it can become a real industry, as opposed to, we have tens and hundreds of unicorns now in software. But those new areas like alternative proteins, these are potential for complete companies. So it's not just company that makes R&D in Israel and then everything else is done abroad. Here we can actually build industry. We can see how the transfer from R&D into manufacturing is happening. And I think in your report, you mentioned that there's a potential for 11,000 employment positions, and these are high-tech positions. These are not people working on a manufacturing line. These are people with very high salaries, and these are people that are working in deep tech, high-tech industry. So this is what's exciting for us. And with some 200 and more startups in the area, this is emerging as a serious growth potential.
Definitely. And I too see it obviously as a field that has potential to be of strategic essence to Israel as a country. So how do you see, how do you foresee?
And to the world.
And to the world, exactly. So how do you foresee the future of the Israeli government support for the field, also including the IIA?
So the most important piece, of course, is the regulation, because this is a completely new technological area. Growing meat from animal cells, this has not been done before in the world. So the regulators around the world are still struggling with defining very clear procedures and very clear rules, because their first, the most important part of the work is to ensure our safety. But we want the regulator to ensure safety, but also to be the regulator that helps innovation. So we're working with the local regulator on defining the procedures, the rules, the type of safety information that will be required in order to approve alternative protein products for manufacturing and for marketing in Israel. And I think this could be a huge boost to the local industry.
So if you had to take a guess, Do you think we could be tasting cultivated meat in Israel anytime soon?
Well, regulation is one side. I think the problem with cultivated meat, and that's the second piece that needs to be approached, is how to ensure that it's cheap enough, how to ensure that the cells are grown fast enough, how to ensure that the texture reminds people of meat. I mean, I probably wouldn't want to eat something that reminds me of meat, but that's what the majority of the population will want. So there are many challenges, and I think the manufacturing challenge and the growth technology challenges, these are areas that we support with grants. We have quite a few projects going on now on technologies that enable faster growth of the cells, but also on technologies that enable fermentation, on manufacturing technologies. We support transfer from R&D to manufacturing with a special new program that we launched this year, and in which we actually give companies money in order to start building their manufacturing in Israel. So there are many challenges, but yeah.
So this all sounds wonderful, and obviously a lot of support from the Israeli government to the field. What do you think other countries could be learning from the Israeli model? Is it something applicable for other countries as well?
Well, I think Israel has been very good in order to encourage entrepreneurship and innovation. With the incubator program, with various programs we have that provide early financing for very, very early stage ideas. And our financing encourages risk. So if you take money from the government and the project failed, you don't have to return it. So we try to encourage risk, and I get about 500 proposals every year for ideas, just on paper ideas. So there's a lot of entrepreneurship. I think the tech transfer is crucial in this stage. And I think the most important piece that I wanted to say is that Israel is very strong in collaboration. We really like and we know how to collaborate. Israel Innovation Authority has quite a lot of programs to encourage collaboration with companies and with research institutions around the world. So I would like to use this stage to invite collaborations. If you're academy, if you're a researcher, if you're a young company, if you're a big company, come and talk to us and we'll help you find partners in Israel to create a better global future.
That's wonderful. Is there any reason for other government agencies who might be watching us right now to be approaching the Israeli government or yourself?
Sure. Give us a call. We have a lot of collaboration. We have something like 60 collaboration programs with innovation agencies around the world. So there's probably a collaboration program in your area. And if not, we'll have to build one.
Maybe we will see a collaboration with an Israeli startup and some big food company around the world sometime soon. Okay, this was our recorded session with Anya Eldan, VP of the Israel Innovation Authority. Thank you again, Anya. And now we are moving forward to an exciting fireside chat led by our own Aviv Oren again, together with Dan Altshuler Malek and Amir Zaidman, two of the top investors here in Israel. Aviv, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Nir. It was really interesting to learn about Anya's thought about policy in Israel. My name is Aviv Oren, and I'm leading the business engagement and innovation for Diversify Israel. And for those of you that are joining us now, we are moving to our panel. I would like to welcome you to our session about innovation and investments in Israel, welcoming Amir and Dan. Amir Zaidman is the Vice President of Business Development of the Kitchen Hub, the leading food tech seed investor in Israel. Amir has been leading the Hub's investment since 2015. Dan Altshuler is a managing partner at Univos Asset Management, an investment firm focused on replacing animals within the global food supply. In the past 5 years, they have invested in over 50 companies around the world, developing replacements to beef, poultry, dairy products, eggs, fish and seafood, including 3 Israeli companies, Aleph Farm, Supermeat, and Zero Egg. Hello, Amir and Dan, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having us.
Hi, Aviv. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here.
Great, great. Thank you for joining us. We don't have much time. This panel is short, 20 to 25 minutes for those of you that are here. Let's start with questions for both of you. What are the biggest challenges that companies in the alternative protein space that you see startups facing repeatedly? Dan, let's start with you.
Thanks, Aviv. So we have, it's a wonderful time to be in the food business. There is a lot of interest in changing the way that things have been. And there's a lot of entrepreneurs who are jumping into the space. There is a lot of additional help from large corporations. There's a lot of money going around. But some of the challenges remain the same that food businesses have always been. Scaling up and understanding how to be able to manufacture quality products that maintain consistency, that are safe to consume, and that are within the price margins that consumers can pay is very hard. So we see a lot of entrepreneurs who have a wonderful idea and they're able to play with it at lab scale. But taking it out of the lab or taking it out of their kitchen and going into a pilot production or going into a large scale manufacturing requires a lot more thinking through and a lot more experience. Everything from sourcing to the manufacturing processes themselves. So that is, in my opinion, that is the biggest challenge that we have seen for many years. And it's probably the one that we focus on the most when we're exploring potential opportunities to invest with companies.
I want to, to echo on what Dan said. We see a lot of entrepreneurs that are coming into food tech from other spaces. And scaling up in food is very, very different than scaling up in, well, definitely in software, but even in, medical devices. The whole structure of the industry is so different than what it is in other industries. And just want to re-emphasize what Dan said. It's difficult, it's different. You need to have experience, and you need to have the potential and the know-how on how to do it. I want to add one more point, and this is, well, first of all, I want to say that it's a very broad question, and it's very different for different kinds of companies. You mentioned that, Dan has invested in Israel, both in Zero Egg, for example, and in Aleph Farms. Those are companies that are facing very, very different challenges. But I think that one thing that is in common for all of those companies is meeting your customer and understanding your customer needs. And companies need to meet their customers as soon as they can in order to make sure that the product that they're developing, it can be a final product, it can be an ingredient or a process, meets the requirements of whomever the customer is. It can be the consumer or it's a B2B company. You need to engage. You need to know what it is. And a lot of entrepreneurs are postponing this occasion of actually meeting their customer in order to make sure that their product is the right one for that particular customer. And I think that this is something that needs to be done as early as possible by each and every food tech companies. Might be the case in other industries as well.
I think this is very much true also for Israeli companies that would like to approach the big markets. So to understand the markets that you are going to play and to sell your products as soon as possible. If you are aiming also to a B2C strategy is very important in the case of startups coming from Israel. So very good points. Thank you for both of you. Now, Amir, let's stay with you for several more questions. The Kitchen Hub Incubator is one of the leading programs in the world for early stage start ventures in the food tech and in alternative protein. What percentage of your portfolio companies are coming from alternative protein?
So alternative protein is a major part of our portfolio companies. We've done investments in almost, I think, we've done 20 investments so far, and I think there's two more that we are working on, which I hope we will be able to announce very, very shortly. And we've done investments in, I think, in all areas of alternative proteins, in cultivated meat, in plant-based meat, plant-based eggs, plant-based dairy. We've done in recombinant proteins. By the way, is there a more catchy name for that right now? Using microorganism to produce proteins, precision fermentation, recombinant proteins. What do we call it right now? What
so
is the
in G5 we refer to a precision fermentation. If it's done by fermentation, recombinant protein can be on plant as well. So it's tricky how you are going to refer it. Yeah.
So Dan, what's your take on that?
We follow the GFI on all naming and branding issues. They do such a good job all over the world of explaining what is cultivated, what is cultured, what is precision. You know, I follow their lead. Okay, so precision fermentation based proteins in dairy, and recently even fungi and yeast, and even insect proteins. So I think we have experience across the board on all of those different aspects of alternative protein. Some are products companies, some are ingredients companies. So we have a diverse portfolio in that space. Altogether, alternative proteins and companies that are dealing with alternative proteins is about 50% of our entire portfolio, and the rest is with other healthy eating, innovative foods, sometimes in technological aspects of the food, etc., etc. Yeah, but to answer your question, about 50%. That's the short answer.
And do you maybe know what percentage of the capital that they've raised out of your portfolio? Is it similar to the 50%, or their ability to raise bigger amounts into the environment?
It's more than 50%. I would imagine that it is about 70% of the total amount that was raised by our portfolio, maybe even 75% is in alternative proteins.
Now, why do you think this is? Why do you think this reality is?
Alternative proteins is a thrilling space. It has tremendous potential for disruption in the food supply chain. It's very impactful. People are thinking of that and saying, okay, we can, if we do this right, if this entire space is being grown and adopted by consumers, we can eliminate some of the troubles, bad things that the food industry is imposing on the planet. And this is, it's almost mind-blowing. There's so many things that can be done differently and change for the better. So this is, on one hand, is very exciting for entrepreneurs, and on the other hand, also for investors. So it brings to a point where there's a lot of new ventures and innovation and entrepreneurship in that space, but also a lot of money that wants to invest in those opportunities. We almost have a perfect storm in that space of alternative proteins. I'm not saying everything is good. I'm not saying everything will succeed. Far from it. But to your question, why this is the case, that this is now the hottest space in food tech, I think this is the reason. It has tremendous potential for disruption, for impact, for changing things dramatically for the better on the food industry. And it's exciting. So, and of course, not to mention the potential upside. If you talk about industries such as meat and dairy, which are many billions, if not trillions of dollars industries, the winners have a lot to gain and a lot to wait for in terms of the winning prizes for the winning companies. Dan, you want to add?
Thank you. Now, Now, I will move in the same directions here, and maybe this is a question for both of you. How would you respond to investors that claim that there is too much buzz around alternative protein in the last 1 or 2 years, and that valuations are too big?
I would agree with a lot of that, and I would agree with Amir. I'll tell you why. If you look at the overall numbers, yes, there's a lot of money going into food tech in general and alternative proteins in particular as it relates to 5 or 10 years ago. But if you compare it to the amount of money that's going into other areas of innovation, call it AI, call it robotics or whatever, it's not that much. And this is for the safety of the planet, for our future existence, for our health, for the ecosystem. So if you put things in perspective, I think we're just starting to catch up to the realities of what it takes and what is necessary for us as a human species. On the flip side of that, I think there is a lot of capital that is buzzing around the markets, not just in food, but in everything else, that is looking for a home. And that has put some crazy valuations every now and then. And this is where we, as a firm that's been in the space that recognizes the potential outcomes and the length of time it needs, we have our disciplines. And it's hard as a human to not have a fear of missing out. If I said that I don't have, I'd be lying to myself. But that's why we set our guidelines. We understand the potential exits. We recognize what the life of any of these companies is going to look like from a funding perspective. And if something is outside of our criteria, we are going to wish them well. But we're also going to remind them that come 2 or 3 years from now, the markets might not be as fluffy. And a ridiculous valuation today will probably get the founders in trouble at a later stage. So, it's important to be mindful. Food is food. It's not software. The margins aren't the same. We're not going to scale the same. So thinking that this time is different, that's never led to anything productive.
So I totally agree with Dan. I couldn't say it better. I think just, you're saying that we're catching up, Dan, and sometimes I have a feeling that the investment and capital side is catching up faster than the entrepreneurship and innovation side. And there is no point at this point in time, not that there is no point, but I think we see, I wouldn't say a lot, but not a small amount of Me Too companies right now. So, there was the first wave, very innovative of companies. Some companies or some ventures that are coming up right now are Me Too with a very small, if at all, differentiator based or compared to what already exists. And I think there is a lot of more innovation to come, and it's coming, but it's coming a little slower than the money is pouring into the space, and this creates a little bit of hype and inflation in valuations. And having said that, everything else is I completely agree with what Dan just said.
So we need to increase the deal flow that is coming in your doors. We are working on that at G5.
Diversify. I would say diversify. Also, look, there are some untapped opportunities. Africa. But we need to recognize that potential products for Africa need to be based on the realities of the continent in terms of the distribution networks available, the last mile distribution, the potential for cold chain refrigeration, or rather the lack of it, and also the cultural elements of this. Whenever we go into a new market, not from an investment point of view, but for selling into that market, we need local eyes and ears to understand the palate, to understand how food is consumed, or what consumers are expecting. It can be something as minute as the level of salt in a product or the acidity. That's going to change completely. So I think, and this is why the GFI's global footprint is so important. Because yes, you can adapt some products from certain countries to other geographies, but it's not always the case. And if you want to grow, and look for the diversity that Amir is talking about, we need new entrepreneurs who are going to bring in, potentially game-changing innovations.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And just to add to your list of challenges that you mentioned, at least in my point of view, one of the biggest one is business model, because every investor in every startup is asking, okay, so how do we make money here? And I think that typically new innovation is not the cheapest thing around, and business model in catering to the needs of Africa, as you mentioned, can be in many cases very challenging. It's a whole other area of innovation that has to take a very serious look into the cost and who's the customer, who's paying for that, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you very much for both of you. Dan, this next question is for you. What makes Israel's alternative protein ecosystem so unique in your view as an investor?
I think it's a mix of different things. Israel has always been the original food tech company. It was founded in the desert. People needed to learn how to grow things. So I think this is just an evolution of what started, more than half a century ago. So you have that. Then you have the Israeli entrepreneurial spirit that has been very prevalent in other industries, and now it's starting to be focused here. Third, you have the overall timing of food tech, like Amir explained. And fourth, I think you have had a very strong push, a lot of foresight by leaders within the food industry in Israel and the government and companies such as Strauss and the Kitchen that have taken a leadership position and have able to say, okay, this is good for the country, but we need something to actually activate it and create this positive cycle. So the grants from the Israeli Innovation Authority, that is a case study that a lot of other countries should follow. You have Canada that's doing an amazing job trying to change their agriculture and add value to it. And I think they're doing a good job, but I think they have a lot to learn from Israel. I wish that the US would also recognize the potential to change what is a very, very big industry that has a lot of challenges in and of itself. But what is it of Israel? It's timing, it's the people, it's the culture, it's a foresight to invest in something and to really push the limits of innovation and back it with serious dollars.
You convinced me.
Okay.
Thank you. But so you both mentioned about diversity and more innovation. What do you think will improve the innovation, the deal flow, the rate of success of the Israeli startups in this industry? Questions for both of you. What do we need to improve? What do we need to improve here?
One thing that I'm starting to see, but I think there's a lot more that can be done there. Israel has amazing universities. And you have had for decades, a lot of very smart people working on projects that there might be a lot of knowledge there that should be transformed. So combining entrepreneurs who want to go into the industry, who might not have the technical savviness or the idea, and exposing them to all this research and development. And this doesn't just apply to Israel, but Israel in particular. You have the Technion, the University of Jerusalem. You have all these amazing centers of R&D that probably have a lot of hidden gems. So I think doing that and also promoting the food industry within the universities and at the college level, because right now everybody wants to be a programmer, and why not? There's 10 IPOs from Israel every week, it seems. So I think it's a mix of that, getting people more interested and seeing and standing on the shoulders of other people's work.
Yeah, I agree to that, and I think there's another aspect, and this is on the on the flywheel that is driving this innovation. So I think it seems that we've been, at least Dan and I and Aviv, you've been around for a while, forever. But this is actually a pretty new space, at least as if you consider a venture capital vertical to invest in. And it is just now coming of age. With this year, 2021, I consider it a tipping point for Israeli food tech. There's a lot of reasons for that. One of it is the abundance of capital across the world and across sectors, but also in food tech. So for the first time, we're going to see in Israel north of $100 million capital raises for Israeli food tech companies, which is a tremendous milestone because entrepreneurs want to go, I mean, they want to do something good and they want to innovate, but they're smart. They want to go where the money is. They don't want to go into spaces where there's no venture capital to back them. So you can have a great idea, but if there are no investors in that space, you're going to have a very difficult time growing your company. Now, I think this year, when we're going to see several north of $100 million capital raises in Israeli startup companies, is going to make a lot of change. I think it's going to put food tech even more in the awareness of Israeli entrepreneurs. They're going to understand that this is something that is, for real. It's growing, it exists, and there's money that is willing to back up these type of companies. And I think this is going to draw in some more entrepreneurs that are, might be serial entrepreneurs that are thinking, okay, what's next? What am I going to do next? And food tech is going to come to their awareness now that this is becoming a bigger and more capital intensive, I would say, space.
I could not agree more, and maybe let's add to that. And this is maybe the last question for both of you. I'm looking at the time. If we are going to those big run of investments by the several startups in our space in Israel, in alternative companies, the B rounds above $100 billion, what do you think is the involvement of the multinationals companies in the Israeli ecosystem, how they can contribute, how they are playing in strategic partnerships, in investments, and are you forecasting any M&A opportunities in this young industry? We haven't seen much of it so far. What is your opinion on that?
I'll start kind of like challenging a little of what Amir said about the $100 million plus raises. Yes, it's wonderful, but when it comes too early, I think it is counterproductive for the company and potentially for the industry, because that is a lot of money. And entrepreneurs, if they have a lot of money in the bank, they might feel pressure to start spending it and not necessarily spending it wisely. So I think the large rounds should be reserved for companies once they have a well-proven, not just business model, not just a good product, not just a path towards large manufacturing, but demand. And creating that real demand in food actually takes a long time to build. If you're going into retail in the US, the reality is that any product in the US takes about 3 to 4 years to actually get a really nice churn. And that takes time and that takes learning, and there are no shortcuts. When people are trying to hack their way into growth in food, most of the cases that we have seen have not proven successful. So it's kind of like being wary. At the same time, there's a lot of money right now. So would I tell an entrepreneur not to accept the check? That's a different story.
Dan, just to make a short note, because I absolutely agree with your comments right now. I was talking about a different aspect of those, not how they affect the particular company that was raising the money, but more how it can, as I mentioned before, the flywheel that drives the industry. Those big rounds are necessary in order to create the awareness. That's but agreeing to everything you just said.
As it relates to the strategics are important if for no other reason that you get to leverage everything they have. And it is distribution channels, but it's also knowledge. It's knowledge of how the logistics within the food system works. It's knowledge about how to build the relationships with the retailers. It's knowledge about how consumers on a daily basis are purchasing food products. Because that's the challenge here. You don't have a winning company if you get to sell one product to 1 million people. You get to have a winning product if you get to sell one product in a short period of time to a lot of people and repeat and repeat and repeat. And that is actually what's really, really hard about our industry. As it relates to your question on consolidation, I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to start happening. I think you're going to start seeing a lot of companies that are reaching the point where they cannot grow internally more, where the opportunity to bring in venture funds might no longer be that possible for them because they stalled on their growth, but they're still wonderful companies. And so a roll-up strategy, whenever it comes, probably will be helpful. Hopefully, if it is led by people who know the industry and not people who have big wallets to spend.
I just want to, first of all, I want to touch on this point and say that we see a lot of multinational activity in Israel. So we recently read about the deal Nestle made with Future Meat Technologies, and before that, the involvement of BRF and Cargill with Aleph Farms, and we know that Innova Pro is doing a lot of collaborations with multinationals, and Nestle has their own scouting and innovation in Israel, as well as PepsiCo and Coke. All of the, not all, but many of the major multinational foods F&B companies are very interested in Israeli innovation and are making it their business to know what's going on here and are collaborating with Israeli startups. Now, to go back to what Dan said,
I just want to say, Amir, that we have 1 or 2 minutes and we will need to finish. So.
Yeah, this is going to be very short. It's just nice coincidence that your last question is connected directly to your first question, where Dan said that the challenge is in scaling up and reaching the consumer. And then you asked about the role of multinational, and this is, as Dan just explained, exactly that. I mean, they know how to do that, and their role in this ecosystem is to support the startups in doing that. And it's critical, maybe very different from other industries like we mentioned at the beginning. In this space, in the food space, it is a critical role that the multinationals have in the development of the food tech sector. And again, bringing us back to the beginning with the challenges of scaling up.
Thank you, both of you, for those interesting enlightenment point of views. It's a shame that it's a short panel and we have to finish. It was super interesting and it was a pleasure to host you both. Following our panel, a short message by Gideon Bachar, the Israeli Special Envoy for Climate Change and Sustainability. Please join us to the networking session starting at 10 a.m. Myself and Nir Goldstein, GFI Managing Director, will be there to chat, network, and to answer any of your questions. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Amir. Thank you, Dan. And bye-bye.
Thank you, Aviv. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much.
Shalom, everyone. My name is Gideon Bechar, Ambassador and Special Envoy for Climate Change and Sustainability at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Israel. On behalf of the Israeli government, I am happy to send my support and greetings to GFI. Israel sees the alternative protein ecosystem as a national strategic asset. It's clear today that this field has an immense potential in addressing some of the world's most burning issues like climate change, environmental degradation, the food crisis, as well as public health risks. These days, when countries and governments are measured by their contribution to the global efforts to mitigate these challenges, we are proud to see the groundbreaking, impactful accomplishments of the innovative alternative protein ecosystem here in Israel, and we are privileged to share them with the rest of the world. It was incredible to see alternative proteins make huge strides this year. It's the fastest growing technological industry in Israel, and we have today over 40 alternative protein startups here, and the number keeps growing. New incubators and accelerators are springing up, and we see more and more scientists dedicate their careers to alternative protein research. Recent technological advancements make these alternative test years more scalable and more affordable. This draws huge public interest and investments are skyrocketing. However, this is only the beginning. We want to see plant-based, cultivated, and fermentation-based alternatives become integral part of the global food system. And this is where governments around the world should band together and support this sector with research funding, infrastructure, and supportive regulations. Our planet needs a global solution, and we are happy to be at the forefront and to see Israeli technology scale and make impact everywhere in the world. I'm excited to be part of this historic change, and I look forward to continuing our fruitful collaboration with GFI. Thank you, and toda rabah.